Hello everybody, Gasp A, pretty snazzy walkthrough Resident Evil Code Veronica X A rank. Yeah.
Hey, Nardal7 here. Do you remember me?
Yeah. Hey guys, okay. So all my fans, by now, oh I said fans. Oops, I don't have fans. That's my joke. Narb's here? He exists. Okay, cool. Okay. So, what we're gonna talk about instead of talking about this game, gonna be completely unrelated. Whether or not classics like first in the series games should be universally heralded as being awesome. Alright, so we'll briefly touch back on the Resident Evil 1 thing again. So, do you think that just because it's the first in the series, it should be like universally accepted as being awesome?
Well, yeah, I think it should, definitely.
Okay, now, do you think that applies for like most situations?
In other games, sometimes, but not always.
Okay, now, like, what would you say if like the first game in the series like was like genre defining, but then the game series like decides to like change it
To go a different way.
and then it becomes more well known for being that? Would you still
Yeah.
say the first game should be universally accepted as awesome? It's like sort of like Resident Evil, how it started with this like survival horror thing and turned more of an action horror with Resident Evil 4, and that's like the one everyone knows now. Like, do you think because of that, the first one should still be called a classic? Like, I think like equally you can call Resident Evil 4 a classic because it's old
Yeah,
enough.
yeah.
Okay.
Well, they're both classics, but obviously they're different genres, really.
Yeah. Now, though.
But
Okay.
like other games I can think of that kind of fit the same mold, like Assassin's Creed, for example. Like the first game is completely different from the games that followed it, but I still think that the first game is obviously my favorite in that series too, but I think it's a better game
Okay.
than the more recent ones.
Yeah. Now, here's what I think. Now, for like what I've seen of your Let's Play, and like I've played for like at least half the game now, I'd say I do like. I think they improved the gameplay like tenfold in the other ones, and they kept it relatively the same concept, but they kept they made it aesthetically a billion times better. You know what I mean?
Sort of, yeah, but
And I'm just gonna like, throw this out there. I've read, based on all the reviews I've read, everyone seems to like really not like the first game compared to the other one. Like you're the only person I've ever heard say the first one's the best.
that's my favorite, definitely. Just because, like, you were telling me that a lot of people like Resident Evil, Assassin's Creed 2, like the most.
Yeah, because everyone was like, oh.
Assassin's Creed 2 is the most ridiculously easy game I've played in my entire life. Like,
Is it?
literally, all you have to do is hold down, like, the defense button, and you will not get hit at all. You don't have
Really?
damage at all.
I read the same exact thing for the first game.
No, there were enemies, they could,
Like break,
well, first of all, they could counter your attacks and damage you.
Yeah,
Which
so-
is something that they really didn't do in any of the other games.
All right, so you're saying like strong enemies that can like break your guard too?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that made the first game a lot more difficult.
Okay.
Because towards the end of the game, it actually gets somewhat challenging.
All right, so
very
I
challenging.
don't want to turn this into like the huge
Yeah, no.
Assassin's Creed
Yeah, no.
discussion. All right,
But I
so now, like, what would you say about like? Have you ever actually played the first Legend of Zelda?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so I won't go into that. My opinion, I really don't like the first Zelda game. Zelda's like my second favorite game series behind Resident Evil. I think the first game is a piece of crap. Anyone who like thinks that game's amazing, it's like genre defining for like the adventure series, you're clearly in denial, okay? Like, I think if you want to say one that like was genre defining, I'd say like Link to the Past or Link's Awakening, right? Anyway, so like we were saying this earlier, I asked him, I was like, okay, did you ever notice like how Melee, Super Smash Bros. Melee is like a billion times better than Brawl? And he said, like, oh yeah, definitely. And then it's like, then he goes on to say the first one was the best. Okay, this is the part where you're gonna justify this, and we'll debate it a little bit.
Well, if I said the first one was the best, I mean, maybe not, but I definitely liked it the most. Perhaps I didn't play it enough to get a full opinion on that, but I remember playing the first game, and I remember thinking, wow, this is better than Melee and Brawl. And I don't remember why I thought that, but I remember thinking that.
Like, I can go back and, like, show you some stuff of it. But, you know, it's like in the first game, the one thing that really ticked me off, like, I'm sure they definitely could have, like, fixed this a little bit, the sound effects. They were, like, terrible. Like, almost every single time you hit something with someone, it sounded like bowling pins falling over. Yeah, it did. I think it was like the worst thing ever. I think, and then in Melee, they greatly like diversify the entire game. It's like, hey, let's give every character like another special attack, like the B moves. Like the inclusion of the horizontal B attacks was like one of those genius things that they could have done. And plus, they improved like the physics engines like tenfold. Did you notice that?
Yeah.
And how in Brawl they actually like unimproved it. Cause I didn't notice this until someone pointed it out to me, but in Brawl they took out the basic physics of if you're running and you jump, you should run far. You should jump farther, right?
Mm-hmm.
In Brawl, a running jump is the same as a non-running jump.
Yeah.
It's a little dumb.
Yeah.
Oh, hold on a second. There's this scene with Alfred. It's like, oh my god, I'm gonna go around Alfred. I'm gonna lose a monster. And I think he was talking in his half Alexia voice too, so it was funny. All right, you're about to say?
Yeah, I think something we should definitely point out though, in talking about all these how the original wasn't as good and it was good and whatnot. You got to remember that the originals, well, they were from a different time. So what we today might consider as terrible in by our standards, maybe that was amazing back to people back in the day when it first came out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm saying.
Okay. Yeah, I know. Back in the time, that'd be the bee's knees,
Yeah.
but even then, you can't always use I guess time can't always be your lens of objectivity, because that also ends up being just as subjective too. Because saying oh, this was old also gets a bunch of people saying, oh yeah, that was my childhood. I love that game back in the day. I think just the old games should apply at least some basic logic that they could have easily included. One thing that really takes me off a lot of NES games, and by a lot I mean the first Metroid and the first Zelda, is the whole thing where the first Zelda game, it's I think it was the first game to have on cartridge saves and not the stupid password system that a lot of games had. So if they bothered to do that, what they could have done is make it so it's programmed to remember how many hearts you have, but they couldn't bother to make it so you spawned and have all your hearts back. You know what I mean? Every other Zelda game, the whole finding hearts was much easier. So when you did spawn with 3 hearts, it's not a total pain. But in the first Zelda game, it was you spawn with only 3 hearts left, and the only way to heal them is to find a fairy, or go to a magic fountain or something, or just randomly kill enemies and just hope they have the 1 in 20 chance of dropping a heart. You know what I mean? And until the end of the game, you don't have easy access to a full heal, so it's a total pain. The old. Having to go back and find the dungeon again and get back to where you were, that should be punishment enough for dying. But no, let's make you get all your hearts back too. It's unnecessarily painful. And then the original Metroid game, what they did, they make you start with only 30 of your health left. I mean, they had the password too, but if they remember how many energy containers you had, they should have the decency to fill them up for you when you respawn. And the fact that the enemies only drop things in intervals of 5 and 10 or something like that, and they rarely drop them. So by the end of the game, you're screwed if you die.
Right.
You know what I mean? I actually managed to play through that whole thing. And I'm okay, never again.
Yeah.
Okay, what were you about to say?
It's just the point of the whole generation too. It's say for Resident Evil 4, for example. I think it's pretty much agreeable that it's an absolutely great game, right?
Yeah, it's universally accepted as good, except by the people who are in denial and think it's made it not survival horror now.
Yeah, well, right. Well, we probably will see this in 10, 15 years from now. People saying, "Oh, Resident Evil 4 is so stupid. It was so bad. Resident Evil 17 is so much better." You know.
Actually, I don't see that happening because Resident Evil 4 is going to be ported to 500 different systems. Yeah. That's
But I'm sure they'll find some stupid excuse "Oh, you can't move and shoot. What is this? I mean, are you serious?" I mean, it's just stuff like that.
Okay, and I think
the kind of the excuses that we were making for the older games, that's what they're going to do for the games that we today would be
You see,
considered.
that's a
as
good
great.
point, but I think the one thing that's going to be caused not by thinking like, oh, they should have had the decency to do that. I actually like the mechanic of not moving and shooting.
Yeah, I do too.
Because it makes it seem like more realistic than like having like awesome aim while moving.
Yeah,
You know what
I
I mean?
agree. Yeah.
Oh, by the way, the formula for that is all your gas rounds and then 5 explosive tips, and that kills him. Okay, he's dead. All right, we're gonna probably talk past the video a little bit here, or hold on, do you want to like make another video and continue this conversation a little bit?
Sure.
Okay, guys, we'll see you next video. I'll talk about the cutscene later because it was actually kind of a funny cutscene. I'll explain it to you. You're gonna like make that same thing you did when I told you about Alfred.
Oh God.
Yeah. Okay, guys, we'll see you next video.
That's it.